here. It's been a while. I haven't been making so many videos lately because last year I got certified as an emergency medical technician, EMT, medic. And I decided to do that because I enjoyed my medical training as a wilderness first responder and thought I wanted to expand upon that medical training to work in the field of saving lives. So that's what I've been doing lately, is working as an EMT, and so it leaves me a lot less time to do some of my hobby work, like making the videos. And also the other thing I've been more focused on lately, especially in the last couple of years, is actually writing academic papers in the anthropological field. So I've been doing a lot more like focused writing, for the professional sphere, and more intense research. So it doesn't leave me as much time for some other. I can't do everything. But I decided I'm going to make some shorter videos like this one here, and maybe that's a way that I can keep producing the content, because I think it's really fun. But I just don't have the time for the longer form right now. So the topic of this video was sparked by a conversation I was having online with a large group of people. Now, in this conversation, I referred to an object by the word that we in English would call this object. And many people responded by saying, why don't you call this object by the indigenous word for it? And it made me realize that many people don't understand that there are a variety of languages that indigenous people do and would have spoken throughout the history of the peopling of the Southwest. So I wanted to kind of just address that a little bit today by taking on just the topic of what do and did the people call themselves. So you'd be hard pressed in any to find any indigenous culture that doesn't refer to themselves as a word that means the people. Pretty much every indigenous culture on Earth has the word that they call themselves that means the people. They could refer to themselves by some designation like mountain people, but that's not common. Usually that would be what another group nearby would call those people. Okay, so basically I'm just going to cover the major culture groups that we're familiar with in the Southwest today, and sort of maybe a little bit historically how their names have been called. So we've all heard the word Ancestral Puebloan. That's kind of a newer archaeological term that's used by professionals to refer to the ancestors of the people today who are the Pueblo people. And so the ancestral Puebloans would have been the people who settled in the Southwest, what we might call the Four Corners area, thousands and thousands of years ago, like first peoples on the land. They would be ancestral Puebloan. Typically today, those are people who speak some subset of the Uto-Aztecan language family. And we have been calling those people Anasazi. But Anasazi isn't quite right, because Anasazi would be one of those words that other people called those people. So if the ancestral Puebloans were there thinking of themselves as the people, Anasazi is a Navajo word that was used later to refer to those people who came before the Navajo did. So imagine the Navajo, they're walking through the canyons and they're seeing all these, abandoned ruins up in the cliffs. And they would refer to who lived in those people as the Anasaz. And that's not a correct word. Those people would not have called themselves that, because it came years and years later from somebody else. So we call them ancestral Puebloans. There's one word that's been floating around lately called Hisatsinom, and that is a correct word used by the descendants of the ancestral Pueblo to refer to their ancestors, but only one particular group uses that word to refer to their ancestors, and that's the Hopi. Hisatsinam is a word that the Hopi use to refer to their ancestors, the ancestral Puebloans. Basically, other people would have had other words for ancestral Puebloans. The Zuni, for example. Now the Zuni, I don't know what their word would have been for the ancestral Puebloans, but I can tell you what the Zuni call themselves. They don't call themselves Zuni, although they might colloquially now refer to themselves as Zuni, just to be understood in general discourse. But they refer to themselves as Ashiwi, or Shiwi, and that word means the flesh people. You can imagine an animistic culture where you have the ant people and the deer people. Everything is a kind of a people. I guess people is another word you can think of, like being, right? It's the four-legged beings, the two-legged beings, the flesh beings. So the flesh people, those are the Ashiwi. The Spanish called them Zuni, or rather Zuni, but there's no consistent consensus about what Zuni meant to the Spanish. That hasn't been quite nailed down yet, but it's not a Zuni word. It's not an Ashiwi word. It may have been a misunderstanding by the Spanish of an Ashiwi word, but it's not what the Ashiwi called themselves. Now the Hopi are, as I said, descendants of the ancestral Pueblo, and they call themselves Hopi, and that means peaceful person or civilized person, Hopi. And they will not usually, you won't usually hear them say, I'm a Hopi. The concept is more of becoming Hopi. We are becoming Hopi. So it's like, the word implies personal evolution or a dedication to a way of life. That is, becoming a civilized person, becoming a peaceful person. You're always in the process of becoming Hopi, even if you are Hopi, the Hopi culture. I guess you can differentiate the culture, the name we call that culture, and the meaning it has intrinsically to how people within that culture orient themselves to it. Hohokam, that's another one. Hohokam is a Pima language word for the people who came before. That word is often confused with Hohokam. So Hohokam is the word that archaeologists use to refer to people who participated in an agricultural society before around the year 1200, thereabouts, in a specific geography, specifically in southern Arizona, central southern Arizona. And so Hohokam is kind of like, not a culture, it's a life way, that's it. It's a life way. Hohokam was a life way. And of course, so this life way would have included lots of different ethnic groups within this life way, not simply a lineage of genetics. The word Hohokam is a word that the A'atam, the people who now call themselves A'atam, they call their ancestors Hohokam. Excuse me. So it specifically refers to the A'atam's genetic ancestors, who may or may not have, likely did, participate in the Hohokam lifeway. So A'atam also means the people. And these are the people that the Europeans named Pima and Papago. So Pima refers to the Akimel A'atam. Those are the river people. Those are the river people. Primarily, I think the Salt River is their orientation. And then the Tohono A'atam is the desert people. So the Spanish called the Akimel A'atam Pima, because they, when they would try to speak to the Akimel A'atam, the natives would say something like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And that word to the Spanish sounded something like Pima. I mean, yeah, it sounded something like Pima. And so the Spanish either just called them the Pima people because they were the people who kept saying that word, or they thought that that was what they were calling themselves. So Pima is an outsider's word for the Akimel A'atam. And then the Tohono A'atam are called the Papago. And that name came from the Akimel A'atam, the Pima people. They called their cousins, the Tohono A'atam, Papago, because of the word. It sounds like the word that they used for bean eater. They were the people who ate beans. Those were the Papago. The Paiute. The Paiute are another big group that take up a huge portion of the Southwest and the Great Basin. They're kind of talked about in the same sphere as Southwesterners, even though they're more oriented to the Great Basin, because there are Southern Paiute who very much interacted and still live in portions of the Southwest. They're a part of that landscape. So the Paiute, there's various groups of them, and they all refer to themselves as a word that sounds like Nuwu. So we have Nuwu, Nuwuvi, Numa, Numu. All of those words in their geographically specific dialects mean the people. Again, people call themselves the people. So the Spanish, the word why we call them Paiute today is because the Spanish named the Nuwuvi Paiute. I think, is that right? Yeah, Paiute, which appears to have morphed into the word Paiute. So Paiute or Paiute. So this may derive from native words, Pai, meaning people, and Ute, meaning either, so it's variously translated as high place or, high up, or water. The Ute people are people that are high up people. Okay. So then amongst the Nuwuvi or the Paiute people, you have those people, different bands of those people in different geographies who relied on different food sources. And so amongst themselves, they would refer to each other by their primary food source. So you would have grass eaters, squirrel eaters, sheep eaters, what else we have? Fly eaters. So you can see how maybe different kinds of landscapes may have been more or less conducive to eating certain kinds of food. And like maybe if you have fly eaters or bug eaters or something, that might indicate maybe more of a deserty environment, whereas sheep eaters would have to have more of a mountainous environment. So there would be indigenous words for calling each other what they ate. So whatever word that would have been, it's not what the people would have called themselves. They would have been called that by each other. Okay, so all the people we've talked about so far I guess you wouldn't necessarily call them all ancestral Pueblo, because not all of them became Pueblo. So they're not the Pueblo portion of their ancestor, but they do share a common ancestor in the sense that they all speak a branch of a language family called Uto-Aztecan. And Uto-Aztecan language is a language that evolved from probably the most original first peoples. This is an area of study that is by far not conclusive, but the research that I've read to date indicates that that language probably started somewhere around central eastern California, spread across the Great Plains, and throughout the Southwest. And this is, so all the people we spoke about up until now speak some version of the Uto-Aztecan language, with the exception of the Zuni, the Ashiwi. Their language is currently being studied, and there are a lot of theories about that, but it's not concluded yet. It's possible that they have developed kind of a very unique dialect of Uto-Aztecan from way, way back, but I'm not here to say that at all. We don't know. But now there's a couple more groups that are prominent in the Southwest that you would have heard of, the Navajo and the Apache, who do not speak Uto-Aztecan. They actually migrated into the Southwest much later, possibly around the year 1100 from Canada. It's possible that they were working their way down for quite a long time, but we put the word 1100 on, oh, sorry, my camera keeps going. We put that date on them as 1100 because it seems about the time that they became prominent in the Southwest. So the Navajo, they do not call themselves Navajo, they call themselves Diné. I find it hard to pronounce that language. It's got a lot of glottal stops, Diné, like that. So it's not Diné, it's Diné. I hope I did that right. I was trying. And that word means the people, of course. The people call themselves people. Diné, the people. Navajo is a Tewa word, and it means the place of large planted fields. So the Tewa would have perceived the Navajo or the Diné as the people who lived on great plantations. They were agricultural people, big fields of agriculture. The Apache also speak an Athabascan language. Did I say Athabascan? Yeah, that's the language family that the Diné and the Apache speak. They speak dialects of the Athabascan root language. So the Apache, they call themselves I hope I'm saying that right. Again, it's so hard for me to pronounce those Athabascan words. But again, that means the people. And the Spanish called them Apache, which people think is derived from a Zuni Ashiwi word for enemy. So there must have been some kind of conflict between the Ashiwi and the Nde. Of course, they may have been calling each other Apache, and clearly the Zuni called the Nde people Apache, or something that sounded like that. The indigenous Zuni word for enemy. So you can kind of see how that starts to work. Was there something else I wanted to say on this topic? Yeah. So if you're presented with a topic like a particular symbol, for example, and you say, oh, like a spiral, and you've heard that spiral means something like migration. Sure, maybe to some people it does mean migration, but there are so many different groups throughout tens of thousands of years that have used symbols in various contexts. And so it's very context specific what that symbol might mean. It's very region specific, language specific, religion specific. So there could be lots of different meanings for that symbol depending on the context. Also, there are certainly many different words for that symbol. I mean, probably hundreds, if not thousands of different words have been applied to that symbol throughout the history of the peopling of the North American Southwest. So keep that in mind when you want to, put a name to it. If you've heard of, the Navajo calling something very specific. Remember, other people in the Southwest who come from an entirely different language background, an entirely different part of the continent, even from between Canada and almost Mexico. Those people have completely different orientations to how the world, their language formed with an entirely different orientation to how the world works. Creation, what different spirits are important to them, how the sky would look at different times of the year. Completely different language developed based on those understandings and beliefs of how the world works. So their language is going to be very different to refer to things that might even look similar. You might see, like I say, a spiral. That might mean something completely different to somebody whose language for that thing evolved from Canada, to someone whose language evolved for that thing came from Guatemala. So that's my little speech on language and how it affects how we communicate about things that we might even think seem familiar. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope the fire inside you continues to burn brightly. Thanks for joining me.